You're sitting in your bedroom right now. Maybe the door's closed. Maybe there's a lock on it. You've got your own bed, your own pillow, your own corner of the world where nobody can walk in without knocking. And that probably feels completely normal to you. Like that's just what a human life looks like. You've got your space. You've got your silence. You've got the basic, obvious, undeniable right to exist without someone 3 feet away watching you eat a granola bar. But here's the thing. That room, that lock, that pillow that belongs only to you? For almost all of human history, that was not a thing. For most of the time our species has existed on this planet, you were surrounded. Always. Every meal, every conversation, every argument, every embarrassing moment, every night of sleep witnessed. And not by strangers. By the same 30 people who knew your name, your habits, your reputation, and exactly how much food you took last Tuesday. So, how did we survive that? How did people live in groups of 20 or 30, crammed into shelters smaller than a modern studio apartment, with no doors, no locks, no private bathroom, no separate bedroom, and no way to just disappear when you needed 5 minutes to yourself and not completely lose their minds? The answer goes deeper than you think. And honestly, once you understand it, you'll never look at your locked bedroom door the same way again. So here's what most people assume when they hear, ancient humans had no privacy. They picture it as something that was missing, like ancient life was just modern life, but worse. Same needs, same desires, just no walls yet. Like our ancestors were walking around wishing they had a room to themselves, tolerating the lack of personal space the way you tolerate a bad Wi-Fi connection. Annoying, but what can you do? That's not what was happening. The real story is stranger and more interesting than that. Ancient human life wasn't designed around being alone. It was designed around being watched. Being inside the group wasn't a failure of privacy. It was the whole point. The tribe was built to keep eyes on you, hands near you, and ears close enough to hear you if something went wrong. Privacy wasn't missing from ancient life. It got managed completely differently. And understanding how they managed it tells you something pretty unsettling about what we've traded away to get our locked doors. Start with the basics. For most of human history, people lived as mobile foragers, moving in small groups. Multiple families traveling together, sharing food, sharing knowledge, sharing the same patch of ground. Modern hunter-gatherer groups, the ones researchers can actually follow around and study, tend to run about 10 to 50 people traveling together. That's your neighborhood, your co-workers, your extended family, and your enemies, all in one moving unit. That's not a neighborhood. That's basically everyone you know, and you can't unsubscribe. And in a group that size, you can't hide anything. I mean that almost literally. People know who eats more. They know who shares and who doesn't. They know who's brave, who's lazy, who's sick, who's jealous, who's useful, and who's quietly becoming a problem. They know who's pregnant before she's ready to announce it. They know whose relationship is falling apart. They know who took more than their share of the kill 3 days ago. In a group of 25 people, there's no private life. There's only life, and everyone is watching it happen. A 2007 study on hunter-gatherer social networks analyzed how these groups actually function. Not just as collections of families, but as nested social structures. Close kin, then the broader band, then larger regional populations of people who know each other by name and reputation, which means the social visibility isn't just within your immediate camp. Your reputation ripples outward. People 3 camps away might know your name. That's a lot of eyes for someone who just wanted to eat in peace. But here's where it gets interesting. Ancient humans weren't just passively tolerating this visibility. They were actually using it. Because in a group where everyone knows everything, reputation becomes more powerful than any law you could write down. Anthropologist Polly Weissner spent years studying the Jew/Huanzi Bushmen and published a landmark 2014 study in PNAS, analyzing 174 day and night conversations, plus 68 translated firelight stories. And what she found was that daytime talk centered heavily on practical matters, economic issues, and social regulation, which is a polished way of saying people were talking about each other, who did what, who shared, who didn't, who behaved, who didn't. Robin Dunbar, commenting on Weissner's findings, noted that daytime conversations contained far more social regulation than nighttime ones. Think about what that means in practice. If you cheated someone in a camp of 30 people, everyone knew by sundown. If you hoarded food, you were the person who hoarded food. That label followed you. And in a world where your survival depends entirely on group cooperation, where a bad hunting season means you're starving unless someone shares with you, being known as selfish isn't just socially uncomfortable, it's genuinely dangerous. Your reputation was your credit score, your insurance policy, and your employment history all rolled into one, and everyone had full access to your file. There was no deleting the post. There was no making a new account. So the lack of privacy wasn't a bug in the ancient social system. It was basically the whole operating system. No walls needed. Everyone was already watching. But here's the part nobody talks about. What happened when someone actually tried to cheat it? Turns out the answer was more gossip. Which sounds almost funny until you realize gossip in that context was the original enforcement mechanism. If someone was consistently taking more than their share, not pulling their weight on a hunt, or being aggressive in ways that threatened the group talked about it, loudly, repeatedly, until something changed. Researchers studying hunter-gatherer conflict resolution have documented that social pressure and coordinated group response, driven largely by shared information, was the primary check on bad behavior in these communities. You couldn't appeal to a judge. You couldn't lawyer up. The group was the system, and the group knew everything. Now, food in particular was almost impossible to privatize. A 2014 Nature Communications study on demand sharing in hunter-gatherer groups found that in many simple foraging societies, food brought into camp isn't automatically private property. It can be claimed and divided by group members. Anthropologist Kristen Hawkes has pointed out that large, unpredictable packages of food, like a big animal carcass, function more like public goods than private ones. You can't hide a dead deer. Everyone can see it, smell it, and they know exactly what it means. Picture this. You've just had the best hunting day of your life. You dragged something massive back to camp. You're tired, you're proud, and some part of your modern brain wants to say, "This is mine, I worked for it, I get the good cuts." Doesn't work that way. The whole camp is already gathering. And honestly, that's the deal. Because the next time you come back empty-handed, which will happen because hunting is not a reliable career, someone else is going to have a good day, and you're going to be the one gathered around their fire. Visible sharing was social insurance. Private hoarding was a bet against yourself. In a world before savings accounts and delivery apps, your neighbor's goodwill was literally your backup plan. Here's the catch, though. Even ancient humans needed some form of relief from constant social exposure, and they found it. Just not with doors, they found it with distance. A 2022 current anthropology paper studying hunter-gatherer camp size and spacing found something fascinating. Mobile camps seem to reflect a careful balance between the benefits of social interaction and the costs of being too close. The Human Relations Area Files summarizes this by noting that lower settlement density could help people interact with close relations while still providing some distance from more distant ones, without needing fences or permanent architecture. Privacy before walls wasn't built with locks. It was built with actual space. If you needed to be alone, you moved your body. You walked to the edge of camp. You went to gather firewood or water. You sat with specific close kin instead of the whole group. You lowered your voice, turned away, used the darkness. When tensions between families got too high, camps could split. One group would move, one would stay, and suddenly there were 200 meters of forest between you and the person you were tired of. People could leave, rejoin a different band, disappear into a cousin's camp for a season. The whole system was mobile enough that "I need space" could actually be answered, just not with a room. With actual forest, actual distance, actual miles of nobody. That's not nothing. It's just very different from closing a door. Which brings us to something even stranger. What happened once the sun went down? Modern people go to sleep separately. You go to your room, close the door, and the household disperses into individual sleep pods. Ancient humans went to sleep together. And a remarkable 2017 study published in the Proceedings of the Royal Society B went to actually measure what that looked like among the Hadza of Tanzania, one of the few remaining groups still living a fully foraging lifestyle. Researchers used actigraphy devices to track sleep across 20 days. What they found is almost impossible to process if you think about it too long. Across 20 days of observation, all participants were simultaneously asleep for a grand total of 18 minutes. 18 minutes. Think about that for a second. You can't even get through a short YouTube video without at least 3 people in your camp being awake, aware, and potentially watching you scratch your nose in your sleep, meaning there was almost always someone awake during any given moment of the night. The median number of individuals awake during nighttime periods was 8. 8 people, awake, aware, listening, watching, while others slept. Duke University's summary of this research notes that the Hadza live and sleep in groups of 20 to 30 people, outside near hearths, or in light grass and branch shelters. No separate bedrooms, everyone bundled together, young and old, on staggered sleep schedules that nobody planned and nobody enforced. It just emerged from the natural variation in human chronotypes, and it turned out to be a surveillance system. Someone hears the animal, someone notices the fire dying, someone hears the child cry, someone is awake while you sleep. To modern ears, that sounds like a privacy nightmare. To ancient humans, it was the closest thing to a security system you could build without electricity. And the wild part is that nobody designed it. It just happened because humans naturally fall asleep and wake up at slightly different times. And in a group, that variation accidentally creates round-the-clock coverage. Evolution didn't build the alarm system. It built the variation, and the variation built the alarm system. And then, before everyone drifted off, there was the fire. Because ancient nights didn't end at sunset and resume at sunrise, they gathered around fire, and something shifted. Weissner's Jew/Huansi research shows that night talk around fire was categorically different from daytime conversation. Where daytime talk focused on practical matters and social regulation, firelight conversations moved toward storytelling, emotions, imagination, healing relationships, and social bonding. Dunbar's commentary on Weissner's study notes the dramatic shift. Night fire talk contained far less practical economic information and far more of what we'd call the connective tissue of human culture. Stories got told. Myths got shared. Emotions that were too raw for daytime got softened by firelight and distance. Conflicts got worked through sideways, through narrative, through humor. Children sat and listened and absorbed everything, and reputation spread, not just the bad kind, the full picture, what someone was actually good at, what they'd been through, whether they were the kind of person who'd share their last piece of meat when it mattered. The campfire wasn't private entertainment. It was the original social media, and everyone's feed was public. The difference is, nobody was optimizing for engagement. They were just trying to stay human. Now, children. If you think adult life in an ancient camp had low privacy, childhood was something else entirely. Hunter-gatherer childcare was deeply communal, what anthropologists call allomothering, meaning care from people other than the biological mother. Cambridge research on hunter-gatherer childhood describes communal living creating very high ratios of available caregivers to infants. A 2023 report on hunter-gatherer childcare found that infants can receive physical contact for around 9 hours per day from up to 15 different caregivers, 15 people touching and tending to one baby, which sounds either really sweet or extremely overwhelming, depending entirely on whether you're the baby or one of the 15 people. Probably both, honestly, for everyone involved. A kid learning how to make tools, read animal tracks, or navigate the social politics of the group wasn't learning it from a textbook or from two parents in a kitchen. They were learning by watching everyone, because everyone was right there all the time, doing everything in plain sight. Low privacy made childhood richer in certain ways that are genuinely hard to replicate. The whole camp was your classroom, and the teachers were literally everywhere, and then at a certain point every evening, all of them gathered around the same fire. And that's when things got really interesting. And the houses. Let's talk about the houses because this is where it gets almost funny by modern standards. At Karane 4 in eastern Jordan, archaeologists found hut structures dating back around 20,000 years. A 2012 PLOS-1 paper described 2 of those huts sitting less than 2 meters apart, not 2 rooms in a house, 2 separate structures, almost touching. The surrounding area was packed with activity features and tool concentrations. These weren't homes as retreats. They were homes as workspaces, sleeping spaces, and social spaces simultaneously. The ancient house wasn't a private escape from the world. It was just a slightly more sheltered version of being in the world. And then civilization supposedly solved all this. Towns, architecture, walls between neighbors, except early settled life sometimes made things even denser. Çatalhöyük, one of the most famous Neolithic settlements in Turkey, is a place that archaeologists keep returning to because it is so fascinatingly, almost aggressively, unprivate. UNESCO describes it as a large, long-lived Neolithic settlement with back-to-back houses and roof access. There were no streets. Houses were built wall to wall, a solid mass of human habitation, and you got in through a hole in the roof. You descended a ladder into your home from above. Your roof was your neighbor's street. Their children ran across your ceiling, and if that's not intimate enough, the Çatalhöyük Research Project notes that domestic life at the site mixed family, ritual, and memory in ways that make modern categories look kind of quaint. Archaeological summaries of the site describe human burials under house floors, beneath platforms, beneath the areas where people cooked and slept and hosted visitors. Your ancestors weren't in a cemetery across town. They were under your feet. Literally. You walked on them every morning on your way to breakfast, which is either deeply meaningful or deeply unsettling. And the honest answer is probably that it was both, and people just got used to it. So what does all of this mean for you, sitting in your locked room right now? There's a psychologist named Erwin Altman who basically spent his career on this exact question. And in 1977, he put forward an idea that sounds obvious until you really sit with it. Privacy isn't a modern invention. It's a universal human process. Every culture, in every era, has some mechanism for controlling who gets access to you and when. The mechanism changes. The need doesn't. Ancient humans regulated access to themselves through distance, movement, silence, body orientation, kin proximity, camp layout, taboo, and custom. You regulate it with doors and passwords and apartment walls. Same underlying need, completely different technology. It's like how everyone needs to store food. It's just that we went from a clay pot in the ground to a refrigerator with a smart screen on it that judges your midnight cheese choices. The difference is that ancient life came packaged with something our private modern lives often don't: constant, unavoidable belonging. The ancient human was watched, but also held, judged, but also protected, exposed, but included automatically, structurally, by default. You didn't have to earn your way into the group by posting the right things at the right time. You were in the group. That was the deal. It's kind of like how a group chat is annoying until you're not in it. The surveillance and the safety were the exact same package deal. You couldn't have one without the other, and nobody was offering a version with less of both. And here's what we still don't fully understand. We don't know exactly how ancient humans felt about all of this. We can study sleep patterns and camp layouts and firelight conversations, but we can't climb inside a mind from 20,000 years ago and ask whether they craved solitude, whether they had a concept of alone time, whether the constant presence of others felt like warmth or like pressure. Altman's framework gives us useful language. The archaeological record gives us structure. The ethnographic data gives us behavior. But the inner experience of living under those conditions of constant social visibility, that's still largely out of reach. We're inferring from the outside, which, come to think of it, is exactly what the people in those ancient camps were doing to each other too. So, next time you walk into your bedroom and close the door, next time you put on headphones to block out your housemates or send a message that only one person can read, or eat lunch alone on purpose because you just need 20 minutes away from people, notice that feeling, the relief of it, the exhale. That feeling has a history. For most of human time, it didn't exist. Privacy as you practice it is a recent, unusual, historically strange arrangement. The default human experience, for tens of thousands of years, was 30 people who knew everything about you, sleeping 18 inches away, around a fire, next to people who'd watched you eat, argue, and cry all week. And somehow, in that arrangement, our species learned to cooperate well enough to survive everything the planet threw at us. Maybe low privacy wasn't the obstacle to surviving. Maybe it was part of the system that made surviving possible in the first place. The next time you feel watched, remember, for most of human history, that wasn't paranoia. That was just Tuesday.